right, good evening, folks. Welcome back to another episode, Living the Noahide Life, live with Rabbi Moshe Shulman. I'm so honored that he has taken the time to share a pertinent, relevant Torah with us on how to live the Noahide life. And I know we want to cover some ground, continuing on from last week. Also want to cover some questions. I did get a wonderful question from my friend Terry Hayes down in Tennessee today. Rabbi Shulman is looking all over it, but we're going to try and fit that in the end if we're able to. More than that, with Purim coming up next week, we will not be having a show next week, but the following week we will. And with Passover coming down the pipe, folks, we want you guys to consider some questions. If you've got some questions surrounding Noahides and Passover, feel free to reach out to myself or reach out to Rabbi Shulman on social media. He'd be glad to take those questions. I know he takes the deep time to think about them and give you the Torah position. So I don't want to beleaguer this because every moment of his time is valuable to me, and I'm just honored that he's here for us. So without any further ado, good evening, Rabbi Shulman. How are you tonight? So good to have you with us.
Baruch Hashem, everything's fine. We are going to probably deal tonight, hopefully we're going to finish the whole thing, the key issue involved in the second lesson. The second lesson being about basically an introduction to actually the seven laws in somewhat a superficial way, but now we're going to deal with the issue which is not superficial. As I said, I don't know if I'll be able to get time for Terry tonight because we wanted to keep it around an hour. And since Purim is next week and I won't be giving a class, what I'd like to do is when we finish, maybe take a short break, cut the tape, make a short break, and we can start maybe 15 minutes after that. Do a very short thing discussing Noahides and Purim. It's not very much to talk about because Purim is very short. In Shulchan Aruch, there's not very much about Purim, although there is a whole tractate in the Talmud called Masechtas Megillah, which deals with Purim, but there's not very much of it. Okay, so let's start. What we want to do here, there's an issue that gets brought up, and it's something that's very, very important with Noahides because Noahides mostly come out of a Hebrew roots Christian background, Torah observant Christian background, where they were doing a lot of things in because it says in the Bible, Hashem says to the Jewish people in the Torah to do certain things like this, do that, and so they started to adopt it, sort of like replacement theology. Okay, so the issue of what a Noahide is supposed to do, what allowed to do besides the seven is very important. Now, the main place that people go back to, of course, is the Rambam because he discusses it specifically. The Rambam refers to something as Chiddush Das, which is usually translated as a new religion. But as we're going to see tonight, that's very, very closely related, both linguistically from what he says and conceptually, to one of the things in the Torah called Bal Tosef. Bal Tosef is that you're not allowed to add to the Torah. Okay? So we're going to see from the language of the Maimonides himself that relationship. Now, there is a lot of controversy among Noahides today, what they should do, what they can do, what they're supposed to do, besides the seven mitzvahs that are there. So importantly, very importantly, what I wish to do is actually discuss that now. There are essentially three views that you're going to find among Noahides and among some teachers out there, some people who are teaching about Noahide laws, about doing more mitzvahs than what the Torah says in the seven mitzvahs. Okay? One is that it's absolutely no problem. You can basically pick and choose and do everything that you want. Anything you want, you're allowed to do. As long as you're keeping the seven mitzvahs, it's like you're in a Chinese restaurant. You know, you can choose out from the menu what you want to have. Or a smorgasbord, you take what you like.
Buffet,
yeah. Okay? That's one view, a very large view. I see on Facebook, in fact, it's a very predominant view of people coming out of Christianity. Okay? And we'll discuss the halachic things because everything goes back to the Rambam here, his discussion of it and explanations to why. Then there are two views under the view of, no, you're not really allowed to. okay, that there are restrictions. One is that, yes, you're allowed to do things, but only if it's not for a mitzvah under certain conditions, and we'll discuss what these conditions are. And there's another view, which is that the prohibition of adding to the mitzvahs in any case whatsoever, even doing other things, is, if not totally forbidden, looked upon as somewhat negative and clearly not being Hashem's will. So we'll discuss all of these, where they come from, because they all come from the Rambam.
Yeah, Rabbi, I think like the adding question, especially those that came out of Christianity, they're so used to self-interpretation that they fail to realize where even if you've left that behind, you may be still have that habit of interpreting, and that could be adding. So I look forward to hearing what you got to say.
Let's deal with it now. What I want to do is I want to read and translate the Rambam. Now, the version I'm having here, I actually got a copy of it, is from Franco. The versions that we have out there, and you see a lot of them, have been going through censors, so some of the language has been changed. Here you have one significant change, whereas the one that I have back here actually, says Akum, an idol worshiper, whereas the Hebrew actually uses the word goy, which means a non-Jew in general. We'll discuss about what it means a non-Jew in general here also. Okay, so let me just read it very quickly and go through it, and then we're going to see how this plays out on all these three views, how these people are reading it, and is there a way we can look at the language itself from the Rambam and from the commentaries, obviously, as to which views are acceptable, which is any the unacceptable, which is acceptable. Okay, so it says Goy sha'osik b'Torah chayav misa. A non-Jew who occupies himself in Torah is chayav a death penalty. If you remember, we once talked about that. We're going to talk about learning Torah for a non-Jew again under the category of theft, which sounds very strange, but that's actually the way the Gemara puts it. Theft, or in sexual morality, theft is a little bit easier. It's more understandable. They should only occupy themselves in the 7 mitzvahs. This is basically the conclusion in the Talmud itself. This is not from the Rambam. One thing you have to understand, when the Rambam says these things, it's not his own words. When there is something that people don't understand where the Rambam gets it from, you'll find the commentaries discuss it. Well, where is he getting this from? But this is explicitly taken from the Talmud, that a non-Jew is only allowed to occupy themselves in the 7 mitzvahs and nothing else in Torah. Chaim Goy, Sheshuvas, also a non-Jew who rests. Sheshuvas, Shabbos, to rest, and Shabbos is the same thing. So a non-Jew who Shabbos is maybe a better translation of it, according to what the meaning of it is, because in English, the Hebrew, a non-Jew who Shabbos is. Even if it's another day of the week. The Gemara mentions Tuesday. So even if he Shabbos is on Tuesday, not on Sabbath, not on Sunday, not on Friday, but on Tuesday. If he does it for himself like it's a Shabbos, he makes that his day of Shabbos, he's also Chayv Misa. This, when it says death penalty, this is from Hashem directly. So, while it's not punishable by a court down here, it's from Hashem. But you have to realize, obviously, if Hashem is going to give you a death penalty, it means that he doesn't consider you being really a kosher Noahide. And we certainly don't need to say, if he makes a holiday for himself. So if Noahide, somebody decides to make something, a Noahide holiday or something like that, that would be considered among this. Okay. Klalo shel duver. The general rule is this. Ein menichen oisan chadash das. We do not allow them, meaning the non-Jews, to make for them chiddush das, to make themselves a new religion. The la'asas mitzvahs la'atzman medaten, and to do mitzvahs from their own ideas. Ela, either, or yia ger tzedek, either they should be a full convert, a ger tzedek, v'kabel kol ha-mitzvahs, and they should accept upon themselves all the mitzvahs, or yamad b'terusay, they should stay within what the Torah is. V'lo yosef v'lo yigera, they should not add or take away. That language is very important because what we're seeing here is Chiddush Das is associated with a biblical commandment, Lo Yosef v'lo Yigra, to not add or take away.
Wow.
Very important to keep in mind. But if he occupies himself in the Torah that he's not allowed to learn, or Shuvas, or he rests in a day, not allowed, or Chiddush Dover, or he makes some other kind of thing. Makin Oisa, we beat him. That's obviously talking about in a case when we're allowed to do that, which doesn't exist nowadays. But if they were, we were, in Mashiach comes up with them. The Oinshin Oisai, and we cause them to be punished. Imadian Oisai, where the Noshi Chayav Misa Alzei Aval Aina Naharik. You should know that you're Chayav, you're obligated to die from heaven, but we don't kill them. Remember, last week we discussed from the Talmud, when we mentioned the Talmud says that only for the 7 mitzvahs themselves do we give the death penalty that are part of dinam. So these things which are not part of dinam are not.
Okay. So this is directly from the Rambam.
The Rambam, yeah. Okay, that was chapter 10, law number 9. So he continues, Ben Noach, a Noahide, Ben Noach, Sharutza L'Asos, mitzvah, who desires to do one of the other mitzvahs. One of the other mitzvahs here is not clear what he means, whether it means the 7 or it means the mitzvahs that were specifically mentioned beforehand, like Shabbos and that, but the other mitzvahs, plus Shabbos and that. Mishar mitzvahs HaTorah, from the other mitzvahs in the Torah. Kedai l'kabel schar, in order to have some kind of reward. Now, some people say reward here means just not like, brownie points in heaven. It's talking about reward, meaning that there's some kind of advantage that comes to it. It could be not just a spiritual advantage, but a physical advantage also. But you do it because of some kind of advantage. Okay? Ein meinen oisa, we don't hold them back. La'asais oisa kehalchusa, from doing that according to the halacha.
Don't hold them back.
We don't hold back. Imhuvi oila mekabelin memena. If he brings a korban, a sacrifice called an oila, a special type of sacrifice, we accept it from him, but not other sacrifices. Only the oila can a non-Jew bring. And the truth of the matter is, in time of the base of Mikdash, in the temple, that's exactly the case. Non-Jews were able to bring this specific type of sacrifice. Nus and tzedukah, if he gives charity, mekabelin memena, we accept the charity from a non-Jew. V'yiri li, and it appears to me, shenois and oisa l'nir Yisrael, we can give it to the poor of Israel, meaning a non-Jew who is keeping the 7 mitzvahs, we can give their charity to a Jewish person. However, nizant mi Yisrael, because he is supposed to be given support from the Jewish people. And we have a mitzvah to support them. Now, this thing here is also very interesting because this actually applies only to a ger toshev when Yovel when we have that, is only talking application. However, the Rambam here seems to be holding like other poskim that say that if somebody is keeping the 7 mitzvahs, we will treat them as if they're ger toshev, even if they're not. So, for example, somebody keeps the 7 mitzvahs, is allowed to live in Eretz Yisrael. Okay, even without Kabbalah, but people say you should have some kind of a Kabbalah saying it, but it's not the Kabbalah that for a ger toshev, but it's okay. Aval, however, Hagoy shenus tzedukah, a non-Jew who gives tzedukah, meaning somebody who's not keeping the commandments yet. Mekabel men, we take it from him, obviously, we want for peace. The nois and oisa l'nir goyim, but we give it to the non-Jew, poor non-Jews.
Wow.
I'd like to point out something that I have to say again. I'm going to say this obviously again. I saw recently on Facebook that people were raising money for somebody. Noahides were raising money. This is beautiful. This is something that Noahides have to realize. I mean, this is sort of a smaller thing, but really, once you start doing it, you really have to start considering actually, seeing if you can make an actual organization to support Noahides who are in need and something like that. This is really a very, very important thing. We see here that you mentioned tzedukah. Now, the tzedukah and sacrifices are very interesting, but we'll discuss them later on. Okay, so that's what the Rambam says. Now, let's go in the order, in this order here. The first group we're going to discuss about is those who say that, based on the Rambam, that he says here, that a Ben Noach, that was 9, number 10. Okay, Ben Noach shaloitzel asas mitzvah mishar ha-mitzvahs ha-torah kedai yakabaschar aymayin oisan, that it says that we don't stop a non-Jew from keeping some of the other mitzvahs. means that, in fact, a non-Jew is able to keep any of the mitzvahs they want. Any of the mitzvahs. It means that they're allowed, it's permitted for them to do it without any questions. Okay? Without any conditions whatsoever. We, of course, know who we're talking about among the groups of people who do it, but we see it even not those people who belong to certain groups. Non-Jews coming out of Christianity, it's very, very, very common that they will take the view that they can keep any mitzvah they want.
Okay? So it's done with rite and religion, ritual. And
okay, yeah, okay. So they take where it says that Ben Noach who wants to do from the other mitzvahs, they take it literally as any mitzvah. That would mean Shabbos. That would mean anything in the Torah. That would involve any kind of thing whatsoever. They hold that they can do it. Okay? Now, we do have a group of people who say that it follows everything except for eating nevela. Nevela is an animal that dies of itself. We know who those people are. And the source of that actually is we discussed this Gemara beforehand in Avodah Zarah. And that Gemara doesn't refer to Noahides in general. It refers specifically to the Ger Toshev, which would only exist in the time of Yovel, where there are three views that the Talmud says what a Ger Toshev is. That they accept among the first view is from Rabbi Meir, who says that they accept only to not worship idols, which nowadays, even though it's not a Ger Toshev, we do consider somebody who doesn't worship idols as somebody who can live among stuff in Eretz Yisrael because we're not worried about going into idol worship. That's what most people say that, although the halacha is a little bit stronger than that. Okay? The Chachomim, which is the halacha we do follow, it's a call that anybody who knows how to learn knows that when the Chachomim say something, that's what the law is. They said that anybody who takes upon them 7 mitzvahs b'nei Noach. However, there's a third view called Achaidim, the others say, that they do all the mitzvahs except for eating nevela. Now, that is a rejected view, but is a view that appears here in the Talmud. The Talmud always, just like the Mishnah, the Talmud will bring views, even though they're rejected, so you know that they've been brought up, considered, and they've been rejected by it. Okay, the Chacham rejected it, the Chacham exited 7. So, however, these people are understanding it from there, saying, well, they can do anything except eating nevela, and of course, I'm sure you have heard people say that before. We don't have to mention name. So essentially, it's absolute without any limitations. Now, one thing that's interesting, some of them, of course, believe in keeping Shabbos. Of course, they don't know the laws of Shabbos, so they're trying to keep Shabbos, even though they make mistakes. That's actually keeping Shabbos. Sometimes you will see some of them call something a Ger Shabbos, a special Shabbos, where you're not keeping actual Shabbos like the Jewish people keeping something different. You're doing some of these things, but really, in a sense, you're saying to yourself that, well, it's obligatory upon me to keep some kind of a Shabbos, so I do it. And we've discussed in the past people who've done certain things. Okay. Now, I do want to discuss one place, usually about Shabbos specifically. Okay, besides the Rambam, the usual place where they deal with Shabbos specifically is based on the Shulchan Aruch, Hilchos Shabbos. Now, we are going to go this in depth because I am going to talk about Shabbos and I'm going to go to all the sources about it. So I'm going to just do it slightly. In Hilchos Shabbos, which I happen to be in the middle of learning again, I learned Hilchos Shabbos. I learned all of Shulchan Aruch Chaim once a year, which includes learning all the laws of Shabbos. Well, I need to know it. Just like you need to know the 7 laws of Noah, just like you need to know 7, I need to know everything in Orach Chaim because that's really the daily stuff that we reach. So, they usually quote from a Bir Halucha, who is explaining what the Magen Avraham says. The Bir Halucha brings an issue that seems to indicate that somebody becomes a Ger Toshev is allowed to accept upon themselves more than just the 7 mitzvahs. Okay? He discussed it. We're going to discuss about it. Now, what I'd like to do really is it's based on the Magen Avraham. And since this is a rejected view, I just want to bring what the Magen Avraham himself says.
Excellent.
Now, I don't want to go into the whole issue of the Shulchan Aruch 304. We'll do that when we deal with Shabbos itself, because it's very interesting. One of the interesting things about it is while they talk about the non-Jew and Shabbos from 304, the real place where non-Jew and Shabbos is discussed is actually much earlier. Um, so, for example, in 245, I believe is the first one, it talks about a Jew and a non-Jew who have a business partnership. So that they basically own the business together. What are they supposed to do? What about working on Shabbos? Is a non-Jew able to work on Shabbos? 244 says, what mulachas, what work is a non-Jew allowed to do for a Jew? These are all discussed what a non-Jew is allowed to do. It doesn't say someone who worships idols. It says Aiza Malachas Yucha Hu Aina Yisuo, somebody who's not a Jew, who's able to do for a Jew, a Yisuo Jew. So these are discussed. So this is brought here. It's very interesting what is brought here. It's a very interesting halacha. I will just mention what it is because it talks about basically the laws of Jews and what non-Jews. What 304 is essentially talking about is me with you. What am I able to tell you to do on Shabbos? What is my responsibility? Who am I not able to tell things to do on Shabbos? So whatever. So this Mogen Avram is going to be important. We'll come up with this again. But I do want to say what it says. So the Mogen Avram is talking here, the same thing Bar Halacha talks about the Mogen Avram, because there is a category of a non-Jew called a sucher, somebody who is, you pay him. But it's not just paying him. You pay him, but he has to say to you. I think the closest word in English to this is what's called an indentured servant. He actually gets paid for whatever, or serf. You sort of own him, but you don't. He could somehow ever leave you, but you pay him. He gets paid for it. But he's not totally free, but he's not really your possession. Okay, so like a serf, I guess, something like that. That's what it's talking about. Remember, this is 500 years ago when there were such things. This is practical. So the Rambam, the Mogen Avram talks about this, and he says something very similar. The explanation of what it says. It says here that for a serf like this, somebody who's your serf like that you don't really own, there's no problem about. He doesn't. You're not required to make sure he keeps Shabbos. Okay, we'll discuss why that is, what's going on. It's a modern point. It's a law that applies to me, but not to the Noahide. I have to know this. You don't have to worry about it. If a Jew asks you to do something, if you're a Shabbos goy for somebody, I don't know if I told you this, in Israel, they have somebody in the areas there who is the official Shabbos goy, who's there in case, because there's almost no non-Jews around, so they have somebody in a specific place in the base medrash. He's there, and the community pays him, so he's always there available. And if somebody on Shabbos needs something, then they contact him. So it's a very important thing to do. So this type of a servant, I'm not worried about that person. He could do anything, anything that I'm allowed to tell him, I can tell him. I don't have to make sure he doesn't violate Shabbos. Okay? So he says, what does this mean? But even if he does something for his master, his owner, the Torah doesn't forbid it at all. So, for example, if I ask you to do something, anything on Shabbos, the Torah doesn't forbid that. There are rabbinic restrictions, which are when we talk about this in Hilchos Shabbos, but that's not for you to worry about. I have to know whether it's rabbis forbidden for telling you to do that or not. Okay, the reason why, and this is important to remember with all these laws here, the reason why I don't have to worry whether you violate Shabbos or not is because I don't own you. You're not my property. Okay? I am responsible for only that which is my property. So, for example, there's a law that my animals have to rest. I am responsible for my animal resting. I'm responsible for my slave resting. Okay? I'm responsible for the piece of my house resting. Okay? Okay. The im kibbul live mitzvahs and the haggis be'evet. However, if this person wants to take upon himself the haluchas of being a slave, I'm talking about type of a ger toshav here. But he's sucha, but as far as you're concerned, he's only like your serf, something like that you pay him money, but you don't own him. Nearly the ein rabba mitzvah al shavisas. You don't have to worry about it. Even though he's taking it upon himself, you don't have to worry about it. Because Because the Torah only forbids you for a non-Jew who you actually own. That's who you have to worry about. A non-Jew who you don't own, you don't have to worry about him. Okay?
Yeah, that's from that text.
Yeah. So he says, so he's sort of indicating that he could be makabel this, but we don't have to worry about it. Now, this what he ends it talking about this is that in Mashma Rambam, the Rambam says, "Sha'ain makabel Evid, the ger toish." We don't take slaves today, or get to official slaves today, or ger toish bisman azay today. Okay, which is what the Magen Avraham. So Magen Avraham is saying, listen, in this very unusual situation, this non-Jew might have to keep it, but it doesn't apply today. Okay. Now we know as a fact that anybody who's in the process of conversion does not keep the commandments. Okay. They violate at least something, even though they're being taught exactly the law is supposed to do. They violate it. And certainly somebody who is in the process of conversion, has a rabbi who's in the process of conversion, we are in general lenient about the things that a Noahide is not allowed to do. Somebody in the process of conversion is allowed to do. Okay? Depending on the rabbi who it is, will tell you what you're allowed to do. But even in that case, somebody who's going to convert, they're not allowed to keep Shabbos. Okay? So this is a view which seems to be is in the Pasuk is universally rejected. Now, let me move this stuff to the side for right now. What I want to do is go into the Torah. Now we want to talk about the other ones. Why is it that some people say that you're not allowed to do things the Rambam? Where does this kind of concept come in? Okay. And remember, I mentioned to you that in the Rambam, he says that either you're supposed to keep the 7, or either you convert into all 613 or 7, but you should not add to what you have, and you should not go with. Well, that language should sound very familiar to anybody who's read the Bible, because it appears twice in the book of Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy 4, and I'm going to read it in Hebrew only because the wording there is going to sound somewhat similar. No, I want to read it in Hebrew, and I will translate it to you. You should not add to those things that I've commanded you. And you should not take away from them. Now, the word that the Rambam uses here is
that's verse 2 in Deuteronomy 4, right?
That's verse 2, right? What he says, Lo Yosef, is another form of Hosif. What he says, Tosifi. Okay? Yosef means to add. Lo Tosifi means that you shall not add. It's just a verbal form in Hebrew. People know Hebrew know the difference. And Tagri, you should not take away. The tuf in the beginning indicates that it's future tense. It says here, where you again, come on, find him. Lo Yosef, lo Yagriya. Same word. Okay? So it's using the same language there. And again, this appears in 13:1, which is the point where it's cited as the commandment. It says here, Es kol hadavar asher anoichem mitzvah eschem oisai. All these things that I've commanded you, sishmari, you should keep, the asos to do. But sosif, you should not add ulive on them, but sigurah memeni, and you should not take away from them. Okay?
Pretty straightforward.
Pretty straightforward. The cipher that we have, there's a very important cipher that's out there. It's in multi-volume. It's called Minchas Chinuch. What Minchas Chinuch is, there's a cipher was written by Adam Barcelona, I believe, called Sefer Chinuch. And he follows pretty close to the Rambam. There's a couple little differences that he has on the elucidation and the listing of the commandments. Okay? And he lists the commandments. So he lists it. If you look here, actually, it has the Sefer Chinuch is right here. And the Minchas Chinuch was written by a very, very, very big, well-known Torah scholar, is on the side of it.
Wow.
Nowadays, nobody learns the Sefer Chinuch without the Minchas Chinuch, because he explains everything that's going on there.
Nice.
So, anyways, what's important in the Torah, the Chinuch himself explains to us first of all, what the prohibition is. So he says, listen, you're not allowed to do things more. So, for example, you're only allowed to take one lulav. So if you take 2 lulavs on Sikkah, you're wrong. You're only supposed to eat in the Sikkah for 7 days for the mitzvah. But if you come another day and you stay in the mitzvah, in the Sikkah, and you say you're doing it for a mitzvah, then you violated because you're adding to the mitzvahs. So he says here, part of what the Minchas Chinuch does is when it comes to mitzvahs, he's going to say, well, what's this mitzvah about? Where is it coming to teach us? What's the point of this mitzvah? What is it about? So I want to read what he says because this is real beautiful. Mishar Shei HaMitzvah, from the sources of the mitzvah, and there's a note here that cites that actually goes about the Rambam in his Guide to the Perplexed. Ki ha'adon ha'mitzvah osuni, ahotorim, because the Lord, who has commanded us with regards to the Torah, Borech he may be blessed, betachas hashchaim is the ultimate perfection. Hashem is the ultimate in perfection. The chol masav, all of his actions, v'chol tzivuav, and everything he commands, hem shleimim v'toim, they are perfect and good. So if you are commanded to do something, it's because that's for your perfection. That perfects you. What Hashem said, so that's perfect and good. V'hasoisifus behem, and the person who adds to it, chasud, he's really taking it away. The chashuv, and even more, the person takes away. They different words, but it's perfect.
Well, it's like saying Hashem didn't do it right. I got to add to it.
Yeah,
and that's
what's going on. The Torah says that a Jewish person has to do certain things. Okay, fine, Jewish person does. But if he didn't command you, so remember, he's talking about Jews. So we as Jews, Hashem told you this is what you're supposed to do. This is what the Torah says. If you're going to say that it's a commandment that Hashem commanded you, then you're saying, well, God didn't know what he was doing. You know, he made a boo-boo. God made a boo-boo. He was supposed to really command us to do this, but he didn't. He made a boo-boo.
Yeah, heaven forbid.
That's what's behind when the Rambam talks about Chiddush Das, to make his own Das. When some of the Meforshim talk about this in the concept of about Tosef, what they're talking about is a fundamental thing. Hashem commanded the non-Jews the 7 mitzvahs because that deals with the shleimus. We're going to talk about other things that the rabbis say you're supposed to do together with it. When he talks about schar for reward, because there's a purpose in doing this, these things are going to come up again and again in different places. But the fundamental point that we're talking about here is that why aren't you supposed to add to it? After all, if you wake up in the morning and want to do, why can't I do something for Shem more than we want? So this is, and expect him to give me reward for it. The reason is you're saying essentially, you know better than God.
Right.
Of course, we know. My experience with fundamentalists is that they actually think they do know better than God. Then they know more than what God wants. But that's true.
Rabbi, I just I have to ask because I even saw a post earlier this week that the 7 stretched into 210. Okay, 210.
Again, we mentioned it last week.
Right.
That in fact there's only 7, but sometimes those things that are specifically commanded to the Jewish people, where there would be multiple mitzvahs under that category, as the Minchas Chinuch, remember last week I mentioned that.
Yes, you
clarified. These are general rules. So, for example, the easiest one to talk about is sexual immorality. Okay, there's various different things that are forbidden. The example I gave last week was if you have relations with your married sister, you have a Noahide has violated one commandment, violating the commandment of engaging in an act which is sexually immoral for him or her if it was with a man. Whatever. However, for a Jew, there are two. 1 second.
There you go. Well, folks, I wanted to ask him because I was doing a broadcast last week with another rabbi, and the question of things came up that are moral imperatives, and beyond the seven, yes, there are common moral imperatives, but there's a very, very, very fine difference between
Okay.
doing a moral
So,
imperative or actually doing it as a mitzvah, and I think that that's what Rabbi's clarifying for us.
yeah. Okay. So, for example, in this particular case, as far as Jewish law is concerned, that's considered actually two violations. One is your sister, and one is a married woman. Okay. Whereas for Noahide, there's only one violation. Okay. You don't get the death penalty twice for it, by the way. So I don't want. But for a Jewish person, these things are very important. As I mentioned last week, it's in Yuvumas. Okay. One of the main sources that I use is a work called Mitzvahs Hashem. If you're dealing with a rabbi and he knows it, he's heard about this cipher before, then you got a pretty good idea that this guy knows a little bit about what he's talking about, because it's only people who are really, really into learning it actually even know that the cipher exists.
Wow.
It was written by it was done by his he died on 40 years ago. I actually met his great grandson.
Nice.
Created my minion once. He was rabbi in Vienna before the war, and after the war he came to Williamsburg and lived there. Okay, and he wrote a book on Mitzvahs Hashem, which is basically dealing with deals with a lot of the seven mitzvahs b'nei Noach. So he talks about the issue about Tosef. Okay, let me just, there was one thing. Now, what he talks about is explaining why the Rambam says that things are forbidden. One second. So he has here, the reason why the Rambam said it was forbidden to make a new religion, and that they were only supposed to keep the seven mitzvahs, no more, no less, is because the Torah was given to Moshe Rabbeinu. And Moshe Rabbeinu commanded these seven mitzvahs to the Noahides. And because it's a divine command, it's a similar but slightly different. Because it's a divine command, it's not up to you to think what you want to do. Hashem said that this is what
Don't
you
interpret it. Yeah.
It's not up to you to think what you're going to do. It's Hashem says what you're supposed to do, and that's what you're supposed to do. It's not up to you. So if you do it, if you add to it, then you're showing that you're not doing it because Moshe, that the Torah commanded it. You're doing it because you, Johnny, think that you're better than somebody else, or Mike, or
right.
You think
and this is a problem.
You're not doing it because Hashem said to do it. You're doing it because you want to do it, and that's really what Intra adding to it is about. The Indian, and it's the same thing with the Jew. The Indian from adding to it is because you're not supposed to do something that way. Now, so let's go into the view. The view now is that I'm going to say is the one that you find from the majority of rabbis who deal with Noahides.
Okay.
It's not what I usually say, obviously, but it's the majority. Okay, and that's just the way it is. Okay, the majority view is like this. So let's look at the language, and we're going to explain what it means. Now, what they say is like, how you get around this, that you're not allowed to add mitzvahs. So if you look what it says here in Halucha 11, the language is, Ben Noach Sherutza, Asos mitzvahs. Ben Noach who wants to do mitzvahs, Mishah mitzvahs, Torah, from other mitzvahs, Kedai Yukal B'schar, in order to get a reward, Ein Mon Oisa, we don't stop them, Asos Oisa Kechusa. We don't stop them from keeping the commandments. But the key here is, Kedai Lekabel Schar, in order to reward. You're not doing it because it's a mitzvah. If you do it for a
Right.
mitzvah, it's forbidden. Obviously, clearly forbidden. And this is the view the Radbaz says it specifically. If you do it because, if you're saying you're doing it because it's a mitzvah, we don't allow them to do it. We stop them from doing it. You're not allowed to do it.
But a moral imperative is different.
But if you're doing it because there's a reward you have for it, because you think you're getting a reward in the world to come, or even more, which is important, if you think that by doing such things, these actions, it'll be giving you some benefit in this world, and it's not violating the other laws, obviously, give you some benefit because, after all, stealing and robbing other people would also give you benefit. We're not talking about that. We're talking about benefit where you're not violating the laws. So doing certain things, well, there's lots of things that have come up that are similar. Then that's fine. It's okay if you're doing that kind of a thing. Okay? People put it in a different way, but I think this is clear more what the Rambam is trying to say. If you have some reason, it's that you can get something out of it, and it's logical because you get something out of it. Okay. Number 2 here, and this I do agree with. In the first part, it says goy. Well, I agree in part with it. And the second time, ben noach. Now, as we know, there's 3 categories: a goy, a ben noach, and a ger toshev. The understanding of these people is that a ben noach is now outside of the category of a goy. So any restrictions that might be because of that aren't with him. So they have a little more leeway. Okay? And again, so what is the restrictions that are here? We should go over them, and I would the restrictions that are given here, meaning you can do any mitzvah, and for reward, whatever, it's a fine thing to do that. Number 1, you have to be doing it because you want to have reward. You mean reward in the sense that there's some kind of either spiritual benefit for you in the world to come, or there's some kind of a benefit in this world that's going to come about that by doing it, you're going to make things better in the world, whatever, things like that. We'll find a lot of good midas, having good character traits is obviously one of those that would be considered that. And whether you consider part of this or not, that would be something. Okay? Now, there is a restriction on what's allowed from the Radbaz, and it appears that everybody holds the halacha like that. The Radbaz says, however, in any case, the mitzvah tzricha kedusha v'tahara, those mitzvahs which require have a special holiness and purity, okay? And
Right.
that's what they are: kagon, tefillin, sefer Torah, mezuzah. These we don't allow them to do. There's actually halukha in the Rambam that, for example, you're not allowed to give or sell a mezuzah to a non-Jew. Okay? Not allowed to sell a mezuzah to a non-Jew. Okay?
And the Sefer Torah?
For sure
That means they're not allowed to read it?
For sure not. You're not supposed to sell it to a non-Jew. No, you read a chumash. You don't read an actual Sefer. Sefer Torah means the scrolls itself, not a book.
Yeah, no. I've seen him
that's
come across them with a broken handle and.
Yeah. Okay. So the point, what we're trying to say here is, those things that do not involve holiness are allowed for a Noahide, according to that view of the rabbis. Okay. Now, the view of Rabbi Moshe, and the view that I understand also to be much clearer with the text, is in fact that there is no reward that comes from just doing these mitzvahs. There's things that the rabbis say you're supposed to do because it's just part of your purpose as a Noahide, honoring your parents and stuff like that. But doing it for reward, there's no reward for doing it.
That's a moral imperative.
Yeah, right. Now, first of all, there's a disagreement here, a lack of clarity here. It is said here that a ben Noah means someone who's no longer a goy. And that there's reasons to disagree with that. Number 1, because if you look at the 2 mitzvahs specifically mentioned here, sacrifices, the halacha is you can take sacrifices even from an idol worshiper. So why do you need specifically ben Noach? Okay? Because he's saying ben Noach is not specifically. Ben Noach is being used here because, well, who else doesn't want to do more commandments? It's a ben Noach. So if a ben Noach does it, he wants to do more, it's one thing. Somebody's an idol worshiper wants to do it, it's a different thing. Okay? And also in charity, he makes clear that charity is the difference between an idol worshiper and a Noahide who gives charity. So we see that it's not dafir. And another problem, of course, is if you take this literally, it says here, remember, you're doing morning oisa kechusa. You do it according to the halacha. Well, that would include Shabbos then. And a non-Jew is definitely allowed to do Shabbos. So it's not, we understand it's not exactly what it is. It doesn't mean it's supposed to be. Also, remember the Rambam says earlier that you either do 7 or 613. So how could you do any other mitzvahs? Okay.
Right, right, right. So his own work clarifies his own work, I think.
And even more important is this. The language from the Rambam indicates that it's not allowed, really, that you're not supposed to do it. How? Look at this. What the Rambam says, he doesn't say, Mishar mitzvah Torah kedai l'kabel to do it in what word? Mitter loy. It's allowed to him. It doesn't say mitter loy. It's not allowed to him. Okay? What it says, ein moinen oisa. We do not restrain them. That's
right.
Very, very important language. In halacha, there's a halacha. I'll give you. It's a very simple halacha. If my child, okay, was eating something had something non-kosher, I am required to restrain him. Okay, but if my neighbor's child is eating something not kosher, I'm not required to restrain him. It's not my responsibility. Ein moin oisa means to say, it's not your responsibility to worry about what this guy's doing wrong. It's not your responsibility. Okay? If you would be doing it as a mitzvah and making a new religion, okay, then you would have a responsibility, what the Radbaz says. But otherwise, it's not your responsibility. If he wants to take a lulav and shake it, he can shake his broomstick all day. He can do whatever he wants. Don't worry about it. It's no big deal. Okay? Because haluchas, that seems to be the way that Moshe understands it. They really don't get a reward for doing any mitzvah. Okay,
right.
Those things that we say that you're supposed to do, like honoring your parents, we're going to talk about all bunch of these are going to all come out later on. It's not like it's not what to do. But when you're doing mitzvahs like lighting candles Friday night or something like that, if you're doing it as a mitzvah, there's no reward for that. Okay. Now there is another problem here, which I've raised this actually with a number of people. I raised with Rabbi Blumenstiel. We had this discussion. He was supposed to get back to me with some sources to discuss it. And I also, Rabbi Weiner was in Israel. I said, listen,
wow.
Okay, let's say, okay, there's certainly they're allowed to do, we don't stop them from doing it. But in Jewish law, there's something called chazukah. Chazukah means when you do something for a certain amount of time, it means that you have to keep doing it. So, for example, we have a certain thing we say every year. We nullify any vows, because if you do something according to Jewish law, if I do something 3 times, it's as if I make a vow I'm going to do it. Okay?
The expectation gets...
Right, the expectation. Yeah. So because of that, we do it. However, how does it apply to a non-Jew? The number 3, remember we mentioned before in last week's lesson, that all kinds of measurements which were given at Mount Sinai to the Jewish people don't apply to non-Jews. So, for example, if you can find out if you eat less than a certain amount, whereas a non-Jew is forbidden, but there's no liability. For a Jew, if you eat less than a certain amount, there's no liability, but you're still forbidden of it. With a non-Jew, you have liability also. Even if forbidden, the liability also exists. So one of the difference, because these measurements, which lead to certain leniencies for a Jew, don't exist for Noahide laws. So that number 3 that a Jew has to do before it's considered as if he took a vow, that wouldn't exist for a non-Jew. So does that mean if a non-Jew does it once, intending to do it as a mitzvah or to do it as a custom, does that mean that they've made a command for themselves? I don't have any answer. I haven't seen anybody really give a clear answer, and I'm certainly not going to say myself, but it's certainly something to think about and to worry about. If you light candles every Friday night at a certain time, have you now taken an obligation upon yourself? Taking an obligation upon yourself, there's no rabbinic obligation. Well, there are certain rabbinic things the rabbis say, but there's nobody rabbinic saying that that they can give you the power to say, yeah, you can do it. So what it is, I don't know what the answer is. So that's the 3 things that there are. Again, the majority of the rabbis that you can speak to, Noahide rabbis, will do the second way, saying that you are allowed to do certain things. We just have to be careful not doing because of a mitzvah and certain other things like that. But Moshe, and that's the view that I think is closer to the text of the Rambam, is essentially that, no, you shouldn't really be doing that.
Yeah, Rabbi, I've seen too many religious, and I love how when we started this series, you talked about people that are neurotic, but I've seen so many that they approach religion like sorcery or alchemy, as if they can select certain ingredients, put it together in a fashion, and get a result. And we know that Hashem is a God of order, and people just want to understand. But I think what you're touching on today really helps us to understand what our fingers shouldn't be on. Don't touch the hot stove; it's not good for you. I
Yeah.
mean,
I mean, again, my thing is like this. Even according to the Mussolini view, I think that before you do something, you should really have a discussion. Again, it's what I bring up. Why do you want to do it? Discuss with your personal rabbi, somebody you're close to. Listen, I know it's whatever, but I want to do it because of this. And if you can't come up with a reason why, some kind of, that would fit in with language, what kind of reward, what kind of good thing, then you probably shouldn't even do it. Okay. I finished what I wanted to do for tonight, which is good. Yay. So we started a little bit late. So I'd say we have about 10 minutes or so for an hour. So what I'd like to do is, let me do Terry's question.
awesome.
Okay. After that, we'll break maybe for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, half hour, just so I can take a bite to eat, because I haven't had a chance to eat. I went to a wedding tonight.
You tell me 10, 15, 20, I'll be back on. Okay. But you're going to answer Terry's question.
Yeah.
Could you reiterate it for those watching?
I'm going to read it, actually, what you said.
Awesome.
I hope this is the language, what it is. I just cut out your introductory thing. Okay. He says, there are dangerous people in the Noahide arena that are getting on these threads and shoving their opinion-based agendas and not Torah. I have even seen some Jews voicing their opinion on Noahide subjects and not what the Torah or Hashem states. That is, of course, a very big problem. Maybe sometime within Rabbi Shulman's series on the Noahide life, he can speak on the danger of opinion-driven teachings that are not Torah-based. In Jewish Torah studies, one is not to go by opinion. It has to be backed up 100% by Torah, or it is not accepted. So many are still studying using the Hebrew Scriptures, like they did in the New Testament. This will mislead new Noahides on the path. If the Noahides do not stick to Torah-based study skills and rules for the nations, they might as well stayed in the church, because they would trek down the path of heresy. Okay, that's his opinion, fine. Okay, so let's deal with it. We're dealing with actually teachers, Jewish and non-Jewish teachers.
Yes.
Okay, or non-Jewish people in general, actually. I don't, there's very few non-Jewish teachers out, but there are people who voice opinions who are not their teachers. Okay, this is a very, very important thing. Let's deal with teachers first. Non-Jewish teachers, again, it's not so simple. You can teach certain amounts, but again, there's a difference between teaching and telling people decisions on practical things that come up. I mean, it's like this. If you just go say what the 7 laws are, for example, I know people who do that. We'll give you in general. These are the 7 laws. This was it is. These particular form say if you just in general, but not getting practical questions. How's it going to deal with you? Okay, that it doesn't really take very much knowledge. If you have a good source, you can go. I mean, like if you go through the Divine Code, which is in English with some people, that's a very good book to look at in English or something like that. If you don't have to have too much knowledge if you're going to be just repeating what it says in the book. That's fine. So there are some Jewish teachers who do that. However, if you're going to seriously do what I do, Rabbi Wein does in classes, Rabbi Blumenstiel had been doing, other people, if you're going to be giving teachings on Noahide laws, that's going to be different. Okay, the person has to be qualified, and you can find out pretty well how qualified the person is from the kind of sources they bring in, the knowledge of the sources they have, if they know multiple opinions, why the opinions are disagreeing, and even certain form that are brought. Rabbi Blumenstiel, I like looking at his notes because I like to see which form he looks at, and I noticed this form that I looked at also. The same thing with Rabbi Weiner and other things like that. You look and see this form that are there. Okay, so it's just not sufficient that you've learned those 4 or 5 pages in the Talmud, and you've read these 2 or 3 chapters of Rambam, and then you put out your shingle that okay, I can now teach the Noahide laws to anybody. It's much more than that. It requires a lot of intimate knowledge. It also requires we have scholars like Rabbi Weiner, Rabbi Blumenstiel, Rabbi Schwartz. These people have intimate knowledge of the laws. These are things, and I mean, personally, myself, I don't consider myself on that level, but my views, I follow Rabbi Moshe when I teach. But there's something else which is also very important, is if you're going to teach, you have to have a certain amount of experience dealing with non-Jews who've been involved in Christianity and really know where these people are coming from rather than not knowing. And that's somewhat of a problem. But again, getting back to this question, yeah, there are people out there who are Jewish, who are teaching, who have no idea what they're talking about. We don't have to mention names. Terry, of course, knows who he's talking about. You probably know who. There's people that they themselves can be very nice people. I mean, there are people who are doing it for money, whatever, and there are some people who do it because they get honor from it. But essentially, it's very nice to say that you have, so many and so many things up on YouTube that people listen, or, somebody asks a question, say, hey, listen, I got a YouTube thing for that one. Okay, fine. But the point of the matter is, the issue is, especially in Noahide, is very, very important because, first of all, remember, you came from Christianity. And you came from a type of fundamentalist Christianity. And one of the things about fundamental Christianity is you have first of all, you believe, of course, in individual autonomy, but you also are extremely suspect of teachers and stuff like that. They have to correspond to you. The problem is Judaism is not like that. Judaism is based on authorities. But if you have people who are saying they're authorities and they're not, this is just going to cause more problems for those people who are coming out of Christianity and saying, hey, listen, these guys don't seem to know, and they're being the opinion makers. So why can't I make my opinions? So it's very important to know these things. I mean, one of the things that I'm trying to do is not just teach the laws, because there's enough books out there. Okay.
Yes.
What it is just what does it mean to live the life? What are these things about? And when there's opinions, differing opinions, like for example about adding chiddush das and adding to it what actually it is, you should know what the difference is. The rabbis who learn these subjects well know all these disagreements. I mean, we'll see the people bring the Meiri a lot of times for certain things. The problem is the Meiri was unknown until about 50 years ago. His writings were lost until then. So he was not part of the halacha process. He wasn't, basically critiqued from other people. So basically, as far as halacha is concerned, it's very interesting what he says, but as far as a legal point of view, it doesn't really have very much, effect on the legal things. A lot of things are out there. So you have to really know. And you don't really know these things unless you're really involved. And it takes a while. I mean, I've been involved in this 20 years. Okay? So if you haven't been learning this stuff for a while, it's not. Okay. Now, regular people. Stam Joe. Some guy who, he doesn't have smicha, he's not a rabbi, he doesn't call himself a rabbi, so I'm just a Jewish person. The question always is, okay, what makes you qualified to have an opinion? Who are you quoting for what you're saying? Okay? I try very carefully myself, and most people usually do. Even Rabbi Blumenstiel, you see, he actually is quoting for people. He's not saying on his own authority himself, but he's knowledgeable enough that he says it. He doesn't always have to mention source because it's going to be there. You just look at his footnotes, and you can look at my footnotes, okay? But it's important to say, well, what is your source? I say, well, I followed a Moshe Feinstein, and his opinions are like this. Oh, that's fine. If you're doing that, then you have a source. What are you doing? You're following it. If you follow it faithfully, that's fine. But if you're not, what is your source? Who are you saying it? On your own, you don't have a right to an opinion. No individual's right. His opinion, what you have is you can quote from somebody else's opinion, from authoritative opinions, what the Chachumim say, not what you think. Okay? Not every Jew or every rabbi, as you know, knows the practical implications to the Noahide laws. So remember the question we had about, your wife wanting to have a Christmas tree. Okay? And I've seen many people, Jewish, who say, oh, that sounds disgusting, having a Christmas tree at home. How could you say something? But halachically, there's really no problem. According to Noahide laws, there's really no problem. Same thing about going into a church. Okay? There are conditions in which you go into church, you don't pray, whatever. You should avoid it. Obviously, you should avoid it if you can. But sometimes there are conditions, being non-Jewish and with your family. So obviously, you don't pray.
The voting polls are there.
Whatever. But the point of the matter is, unless you know that you're involved, you're not going to know these. Just being a Jew and a rabbi or having learned certain things isn't enough. You should only accept from people who are knowledgeable or are quoting directly from works that are knowledgeable. Rabbi Weiner's book in Hebrew, or Divine Code. Divine Code's a little bit difficult because it's English and there's a lot more notes that are there. Blumenstiel's stuff is usually pretty good, but Blumenstiel himself thinks he put too much into what's out there. Okay, if you're non-Jewish, it's the same thing. What's your source? Where do you? There's no non-Jew out there I know of who actually has the ability or knowledge or learning could actually on his own say, okay, this is what I want to poskin. This is what it's supposed to be. This is what I think is the best way you should do with this thing. Okay. What you can do is read divine code and say what it is. And when you have a question, you go to somebody else. But somebody saying my opinion is this, it's not saying it's my opinion. Only Hashem has an opinion. Only the people who are authorized to have opinions. Okay, that's basically what we've talked about this before. It's going to come up again. I know people have the question, and I know it's something that some people don't.
Well, it's a reoccurring because I don't think people get the heart of the matter behind it and where it's going.
Right. Okay, let me stop for now. I got to take a break for something. Let's say what time? Let's say 9:45, because it's not going to take more than a half hour to do Noahide and Purim.
Okay, so it's 9:07 Eastern right now.
Right, so 9:45 Eastern.
Okay, so we'll be back, folks. Folks, we're going to take a 35-minute break. We're going to be back at 9:45
because I haven't had a chance to eat myself.
He hasn't had a chance to eat. Forgive us, folks, but we're going to be back in 35 minutes, and he's going to continue. So until then, we'll see you shortly. Okay.
Okay. Bye bye. You logged off?